Hi everyone, welcome to our weekly Q&A session, and today it is my pleasure to welcome here our coach Richard. So Richard, how are you today? It's really nice to see you.
I'm doing great. How you doing, Veronica?
I'm perfect. I'm a busy man.
Yeah,
So I'm sorry I was a couple of minutes a bit late, but all is well. And yeah, I think we can start. And
great.
I have seen a few questions that have been that are on the YouTube.
Mhm.
And uh, the first one was from Lilyhead. Hi guys, did you have any tips to cope with external triggers? For example, if someone says you should be getting 8 hours a night, or after a sleepless night, they say it's okay, you will sleep tomorrow. I know these people mean well and are trying to help, but sometimes I find it very triggering. So, what are your thoughts, Richard?
Okay. Well, yeah, Lily, thank you for that question. Good question. Um, one of the things we have to decide when we're on our insomnia recovery journey is how much we're going to talk to other people. And yes, they are well-meaning, but they really usually don't know very much about sleep. Especially if they've never had problems with insomnia, or if they have had problems, they probably have very conventional ideas like, oh, use blackout curtains and then you'll be okay, and so forth. Or you need to sleep 8 hours. So you don't need to sleep 8 hours, first of all. And so I think we all need to decide how much we're going to interact with other people, family and friends, when we're going through this journey. Now, when we interact with people in our program here, that's a different thing because we all have the same understanding, and we're good sources of information and support. Um, one of the things to keep in mind is that there's a difference between thoughts and thinking. So if somebody mentions something like, "Oh, you should get 8 hours of sleep," then you can dwell on this thought. You can dwell on how upset you are by this person mentioning it. You can research it and say, "No, here's the evidence that you don't need 8 hours of sleep." But then you're just kind of engaging with this idea and thinking about it, and that can just get you um, more worried and hyper aroused. So I think the best thing to do is to not interact with people who aren't helpful. Their heart is in the right place. I'm sure they love you and want the best for you, but it's just not always useful to do that. And if they do mention something, or if you get triggered by it, just you don't have to dwell on that thought. You don't have to keep it with you. So what I like to do with we have thousands of thoughts every day, and a lot of them are just benign thoughts like, you have to go shopping and so forth. But others are more, distressing thoughts. So you don't have to dwell on thoughts that are distressing. You can not push them away, but you can just kind of put them to the side, be with them, but then go on with your life rather than dwelling on them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Richard. And what I can add to this is that sometimes we talk so much about our sleep struggles that everybody knows about our struggles. And as you mentioned, they care for us, they want for us the best. But so they kind of like keep asking, how did you sleep? How did you sleep? How did you sleep? Or how is it going with your sleep, right? And so rather than engaging with them into like in-depth conversation, it's more helpful just to say, I'm fine and I'm working on it. It's rather to direct in this direction, and then they will kind of like get used to, okay, she didn't start the monologue of complaining how her sleep was, or she didn't start talking about all her or problems around sleep. So maybe she's getting better, maybe she is really on top of it. So the people will engage less and less, and this will help you to let go of the sleep thoughts more and more, because it will not be the center of every discussion that you are leading, Lily. And also, regarding the triggers, it's not possible to walk this path completely triggerless, because this topic is very sensitive to us, and because we struggle so much. So you can just anytime you feel triggered, you can see it as kind of like a compass, see it as a, okay, this is still very, very sensitive to me. And uh, because it is a trigger, all you need to do is just to feel the emotion that is bringing it to you. And that's all you need to do. You don't have to be scared of this triggering emotion. You don't have to be afraid of it, because it is an emotion. It's telling you that you are still very, very sensitive to this topic. And all you need to let this emotion move through your body. That's it. As it comes, it goes, right? There is no need to just to dwell on this thought, just like you mentioned, Richard. So I hope we have answered your question, Lily. And in the meantime, we have other questions. And just we had one more question from the YouTube, and the question would be from Nurgul. How do I deal with the fact of being extremely exhausted after a sleepless night? I can't just get over it when I have to go to my regular job and perform. Sometimes I'm so sleepless that I almost faint.
Yeah.
So I can relate to that, Nurgul. I'm really sorry for what are you experiencing. Richard, what are your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, well, thanks for that question. And I know you can really feel exhausted after a night of no sleep, and I've been there, and it's no fun at all. But we have to distinguish two things, and distinguish between physical exhaustion and emotional exhaustion. So physical exhaustion is, with if you don't get enough sleep, yeah, you're going to be tired. But emotional exhaustion is when you read more meaning into it. Oh, I'm so tired. I'm sure I'll never sleep well again. My life is just ruined by this insomnia. So, so the emotional exhaustion can really amplify just the plain physical exhaustion that is understandable. The other thing that I found useful, and this depends on what kind of work you have. I was fortunate in doing working from home. What I found useful was to try to rest a little bit in the afternoon. So when I was going through my recovery, I was unable to nap because I had the same hyper arousal that I had at night, keep preventing me from sleeping. So I couldn't nap, but I could rest. And I found that if I did rest for like an hour in the afternoon, I found the rest of my day would go much better. Um, so, I mean, this is a problem that everybody with insomnia faces. The fatigue the next day. Again, going back to the answer to the prior question, if you dwell on the fatigue and dwell on how bad you feel, that's probably going to amplify it also. So there's not a magic solution. It's going to get better as your insomnia recovery journey continues, but there are some things you can do to make it less emotionally upsetting, and you can get some comfort from it.
Absolutely. And what I would add here is the self kindness, because I see people who struggle with sleep are very, very harsh on themselves.
Hmm.
And they basically expect 100% performance even when they feel so bad.
Hmm.
Uh, and imagine, Nurgul, like you have a fever, you have flu, COVID, whatever, or broken leg. How would you treat yourself? Would you push yourself to perform at 100%?
Hmm.
Or would you take the best care of yourself you
Hmm.
could possibly have? Because this experience is very difficult. It's traumatic. It's an extreme challenge to when you feel like you're almost fainting, when you are foggy, when you barely can focus. It is really a challenging situation. Sometimes when we sleep little or when we have an all-nighter, the next day we have so much hyperarousal that we know we can perform. The hyperarousal prevents us from sleeping well, but all at the same time, when we have a lot of hyperarousal, we know we can think sharp, we know we can perform, we have a lot of energy in us, right? We are in fight or flight. But sometimes, on the other hand, we are really, really exhausted and really very foggy, feeling like we faint. Let this be a cue you need to take care of yourself, Nirgil, right?
Mhm.
Because this is a challenge by itself, like to not sleep, right? Of course, we need to prove to ourselves that we can function after an all nighter, that we can function on a bumpy sleep, we can function with anxiety. But we also need to learn how to give ourselves the self kindness. Sometimes there are the days where we don't perform at 100%. We perform maybe at 60%, 40%, or even if it is 1%. Why we should judge ourselves for such days? There are, you know, if we just compare it to nature, there are seasons where when everything is blooming, everything is growing, everything is wonderful, fresh. But there are other seasons where everything is just kind of like suppressed. So why not, as human beings, as like living organism, couldn't have such seasons? So, and in these seasons, when we experience difficulties in life, why not to lean into self-care and self-kindness?
Mhm.
So, Nurgul, please see this as an invitation to take the best care of yourself, and in the next season, you will see the rewards, and I believe you will bloom. So, right, I hope this was helpful for you, Nurgul. And let's see at the questions. And we have a question from Marco. My wife told me that I'm snoring loudly. Why don't I hear that loud snoring myself and wake up? Mhm. What are your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Marco. Um, yeah, I think you have to listen to your wife if she heard you snore, and talk to your doctor about it. As you may know, sleep apnea. One of the signs of sleep apnea is snoring. I happen to have sleep apnea myself,
Mhm.
and this is treated very effectively with just simple little mouth guard that I put in at night. I don't need CPAP. But anyway, I was told years ago that I snored, and I'm glad I took action to it and went to my doctor, my dentist, and got the mouth guard. So why don't you hear it yourself, Marco? Well, some people do wake up from snoring. It may not be from the noise so much as just the fact that your airway is blocked in your throat. Your tongue kind of slides back. And of course, nothing here is medical advice. That's why you need to talk to your doctor about it. Sometimes you wake up from sleep apnea, and sometimes it just kind of uh, makes you sleep less soundly, and so you're not sleeping as deeply. You're not getting as much oxygen. Sometimes this wakes you up, and sometimes it doesn't. It's not necessarily just the sound; it's just the the whole breathing thing. Obviously, you need to have enough air to be able to sleep properly.
Mhm.
So check with your doctor and see what your doctor or dentist says.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the lines of talking about insomnia, I would add that the fact that you are snoring and you are not waking up to this sound is a proof that you are sleeping more than you think, right? So maybe you are sleeping so deeply that even such a loud noise doesn't wake you up, which is kind of like a positive sign. Of course, like snoring, it's probably the sleep apnea, but it also means that you sleep more than you probably think. So see it as a sign that your sleep is everything is okay with your sleep, and yeah, I I don't think there's that much to add to this question. And cool. So we have a question from PK. Is it still befriending wakefulness when I have to push myself to do something I like first? Initially, I just want to stay in bed and hope for sleep, or is it then turning into a sleep effort?
Okay. Not
Just a
sure the
second.
first part again. Okay. So
Hmm.
okay. Well, I can take a stab at this. So befriending wakefulness is an important pillar of our approach here, which just means that when we're awake at night, when we'd rather be sleeping, instead of considering this to be something terrible or catastrophe, we just lean into it and accept that we're awake. It is a fact of reality, and so we can't deny it. And when we say befriend wakefulness, we don't mean that we embrace it with open arms necessarily and love the fact that we're awake. Well, obviously, we'd rather be asleep. What it means is that we find a way to make it less intolerable. Do something we enjoy at night. My go-to activity, which I've spoken of many times, was to watch Seinfeld when I was awake at night. So, is it still befriending wakefulness when I have to push myself to do something I like first? Okay. So I think often, yeah, we have to kind of push ourselves sometimes. If, like, when I was awake in the middle of the night, I didn't really like staying in bed because I would just get restless. But on the other hand, I didn't really want to get up and do something. But I found that when I did, I felt better. I was
Mhm.
befriending wakefulness rather than just kind of um, having pity on myself for not being able to sleep. And so I think you do have to push yourself a little bit sometimes. Now, on the other hand, it's okay if you want to stay in bed. You don't have to get up. That was my preference, but a lot of people do prefer to stay in bed. But if you're staying in bed trying to protect your sleep, okay, if I stay in bed, then I'll be able to get back to sleep. Well, that may be, and if that happens, that's fine. But if you're kind of trying to make sleep happen, that's probably going to be counterproductive because sleep is effortless. And when we try to make it happen, we just ramp up hyperarousal, and then sleep becomes more elusive.
Hmm. Absolutely. I also can remember myself like I could stay a really long time in bed. I was literally like hoping for sleep to happen. I could stay like 12 hours in bed, and I was literally afraid to get up from bed because I thought like, what if the next moment will be the one I would fall asleep,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I constantly keep myself in this state of nervousness, in this state of like, um, I can't get up. I don't want to miss it, right? These moments. So when I literally gathered the courage to get up from bed, afterwards I found it was much, much easier for me to fall asleep because
Hmm.
I kind of like gave up on sleep. I gave up on trying.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm done with sleep, with trying to sleep. So, and I did something nice, like I don't know, I watched some funny show, or I just sat by the window or walked in the garden when it was summertime. And when I returned to bed, like I almost forgot about how bad I felt when I was in bed. I stopped beating myself, right? Like, oh, I can't fall asleep. And I found it really, really helpful. I mean, befriending wakefulness can take like many forms. Like you can rest in bed, you can get up from bed, you can spend the whole night in panic and anxiety. But as long as you create space for this experience, you are still befriending wakefulness, right? So the choice is yours, and always choose the path of least resistance. And sometimes like Daniel says, courage and kindness. Sometimes you need to choose the courage to move on this path to recovery. So I hope this was helpful, BK. And right, we have a question from Janice Lee. Timeless window. I find that the only way I can sleep before bed is watching a show on my phone because that's the most enjoyable to me. But then I see the time in the top left corner. What do I do? What are your thoughts, Richard?
Yeah, well, thanks for this question, Janice. So, I had this dilemma also when I was going through my recovery, and I learned, I think it's appropriate, to avoid looking at the time if you can. Um, so what I would do, I would sometimes look at my phone, and I would just put a little piece of tape over the time, and that's one solution. And then I found later on, though, that I wasn't really all that upset. I wasn't all that triggered by seeing the time. So after a while, being ignorant of the time wasn't all that important to me anymore. Now we recommend that generally, yeah, it's probably a good idea not to look at the clock after a certain hour, so you're not focused on that. But I was very triggered by it early on in my recovery, and then not so much as my recovery continued and got better. So you can cover it up. I wouldn't deprive yourself if you like looking at your phone before bed and that's soothing and relaxing for you. That's fine. But just pay attention to how whether seeing the time is upsetting, or if you're just upset because, oh, this is a rule I have to follow. I can never look at the time. And yeah, I mean it's kind of a good guideline for most people. But if it's not for you, if it doesn't really make that much difference, either do some tape or just don't don't be worried about if you see the time.
Yeah, right, exactly. It just eventually we want to become the sleepers we are before. And like before we could see the time and we're like, yeah, okay, it's the time. We acknowledge it as a fact, like outside is like, I don't know, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So when you just acknowledge it, it's also another thing is like just see your reaction to knowing the time, because when you know, for example, it's 2 a.m. and you are more indifferent about it, then okay, no problem with this. But if you feel like there is some anxiety around it, maybe it's still a good idea like to have the time covered and not to check it too much. So it's absolutely so eventually this path leads to letting go of all the rules and all the adjustments that we have made to overcome the insomnia. And it's up to us how do we or when this will happen, right? So we have a couple of more questions. And we have a question from Warrior Wellness. How can I deal with the guilt of taking a sleep product to help through a bad time? I'm always contemplating whether to take something that I cause anxiety. At times they have helped. So, how did you deal with it, Richard? Because I know you're also on the pills, just like I was. And
Yeah.
did you feel guilty of taking anything to sleep?
Yeah, I took sleeping pills for on and off for years,
Mm,
um, including prescription sleeping pills and over-the-counter things, supplements and so forth. So I was really very into it. So what we try to emphasize is that you're not bad or weak because you take something to sleep. You're just trying to take care of yourself. So I think this you can view this as coming from self-kindness.
mhm,
Yeah, if there were pills that worked well for insomnia, we wouldn't have this program. But unfortunately, over time, they often don't work. Um, However, we are medication neutral here. So if you find a pill helpful and you're under your doctor's supervision, that's fine. If you don't and you want to stop it, then you can again with supervision with your doctor. I mean, that's fine too. So one of the approaches we have to pills is that you vitaminize it. So you,
mhm,
if you take a vitamin pill, get up in the morning, take your one a day vitamin, and you don't think about it. You just say, okay, well, this is good for me, so I'm just going to do it. And I don't decide, well, shall I take the vitamin this morning or not? You just take it every morning. Now,
mhm,
with sleeping pills, that's often a good solution also. Rather than agonizing, oh, should I take this tonight? Should I not? Just just have regular time when you take it, and just don't think about it too much after that. Um, so when we're in this whole cycle, this vicious cycle of should I take the pill, should I not? We just ramp up our hyperarousal because we're monitoring, we're trying to figure out what to do, and our mind is very active for that. Whereas sleep is a passive process, and if our mind is just more passive, okay, I took the pill, whatever, no big deal. And the problem with sleeping pills is often the conflict around them. So if we can be kind to ourselves and not be judgmental about taking pills, that's going to be our best way to recovery.
Mm.
And a lot of people find that they start our program and they're on pills, and then with time they find they're able to stop them over time. But they can serve as a useful bridge from where you are when you start to where you want to go. And as you're learning to learning getting the education and learning the skills to sleep more naturally, then at that time you find you don't need the pills anymore. So it can be a perfectly legitimate thing, and it can be a nice bridge.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Richard. And let's move to our last question from Mervs. How do I cope with the fear of having insomnia for the rest of my life and the implications of this? So, Richard, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is a very understandable fear. I had that fear. Um, and one of the things we have when we have insomnia is we have quite an active mind. Our mind is more sensitive to things that we're fearful of, and so we tend to be afraid, and then we tend to think of the worst case scenario. Um, it's easier said than done. Just don't worry about it. But I think if you're in a program like ours, you'll find that there are ways to deal with your insomnia. You don't have to live with your insomnia forever. It may seem like you do, but you really don't. There are things you can do. There are mindsets you can adopt. All the things we have to help people put their insomnia behind them really work. And we've had so many people who've been so successful in doing this, myself and Veronika included. So if we can do it, I think you can do it. I think anyone can do it. It's not going to be there for the rest of your life. And if you have these thoughts, again, if you can distinguish between thoughts and thinking, oh, I have this thought. Okay, well, what of it? All right, I'm not pushing it away, but it's just kind of, I'm going to let it be. I'm not going to dwell on it. Because to the extent that we dwell on thoughts and let them go round and round and spend hours on them, that's going to amplify them. So engage with life rather than being overly engaged or upset about thoughts you may have, and just kind of let them go.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just get inspired on the YouTube channel of the Sleep Coach School and all the success stories of people who have recovered from insomnia, including like Richard, like you mentioned, like you have insomnia for decades and you were able to recover, which is your story is really, really inspirational. So, Mars, if you can watch Richard's story, I believe you will really, really like it. So.
Yeah.
Cool. I thank you so much for everybody for being here and maybe last comments from our colleague Christian, best coaches ever. Thank you so much. Likewise, Christian
Thanks, Chris.
and PK. Thanks, guys, for the response. You're very, very welcome. And from our student in the immunity program, hi Jax, hi Veronika, Jax walking by, hi Coach Richard, looking good. Thank you so much. And yeah, so again, thank you so much for being here, Richard, answering questions, everybody for posting their questions. And yeah, I will see you next time, you guys. And Richard, I will see you also some other time.
Okay,
Thank you so much
great.
for being here.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.